This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company. It is Thursday morning, late morning, November 9th. A moment in time, Britt, where the Wolves are 5-2 with the best defense in the NBA, a top 3 team by pretty much any of the fancy catch-all metrics. They're a team, I don't know, they're obviously not perfect right now, but I think watching them, it's a team that if you aren't getting a little swept up in, like you're maybe a little broken, which I think something
Right.
that the two of us have definitely been accused of before. But I thought you nailed like that concept in your column, and I just want to say, like, for some reason to the listeners, like if you only know Britt from this pod or from his little in-game tweets, like read him. He is you are very good on podcast, Britt. You are a better writer. As you know, that Min Post is free, no paywall. Check it out. I genuinely enjoy my 12 minutes a week to sit down and read a Britt column because I know something weird is going to be in there and something smart. I really loved the lead to this. Britt's column starts with, "Sometimes it is appropriate to get carried away. Very rarely, but sometimes you feel like good fortune has set you upon a beast of extraordinary power and coordination, and you can feel both the muscles and the rippling flex take you for a joyride, like a kid in a cowboy movie, and you become a living embodiment of that corny word, giddy up. Giddy up. Corny, giddy up, Britt, but you're in here. We've sat next to each other for 7 years, I think now, at games, and I was reading that, and I thought of only one other time in those 7 years did you kind of embody that, talking to me or sitting next to me at the game. And it was the 2021-22 season, Vando, Pat Bev, Ants year 2. And there's a through line there, right? I think, some of it is a little bit more, it's the fly around mentality.
Right.
It's that energy to this team. Does this season feel like that season to you, but with more upside?
Yeah, at the time, I never want to look at upside because, that's not true. When it comes to giddiness, I never want to look at upside. I basically want to revel in the moment. And almost always when I'm reveling in the moment of a team, it is because I'm somewhat shocked at how good they are. It's like the surpassing of expectations. I feel like I've covered this franchise pretty dedicated basis for decades. So I think I know the team, and they have disappointed, and that's been an interesting feeling. They have pretty much conformed to expectations, which is another feeling. But when they are significantly better than what I had judged them to be,
it's fun.
It's also, it's a jolt. It's Vando and Pat Bev and that whole season. I'm a sucker for defense too. I was raised with Bill Russell, and the team I covered had Kevin Garnett for its best time. So
me being raised by Mike Miller and Randy Foye, and maybe raised was like Doug West and Pooh Richardson.
Right, exactly. You need some more iconic guys, and also guys who it's like, if this continues, the giddy up is going to be less pronounced, of course, because the ambush factor is down.
Yeah,
and that's why it's important to know when to say you're being carried away, because I'm not going to be carried away this. Even if the Wolves win like 55 games and get to the, the finals or something. I remember 03-04, and I was shocked in the beginning. And then after a while, you just become to appreciate it. And it's a different kind of feeling. It's an internalization of, man, this is fun. But it's not like, woo,
right.
Here we go, And so
I'm excited to, knock on wood. I'm excited. I don't feel like I've really experienced that. Like in my, I was thinking about it. It's kind of like I like the exceeding expectations things too, because I felt like the Vando and Pat Bev year was like that. And I'm
It
like,
was.
and then when was the other time, any other time that I really felt that? I put down two things. One, the Jimmy year before he got hurt, when they were
got
like
up
the
to like
3
third in
seed.
the league, right.
Yeah, which I know everyone like doesn't think that's fun now or whatever with hindsight, but I think it was some of that emotion of like, oh, like we thought they were going to be decent, but like there might be one of the best Western Conference.
It was the Tibbs Butler mind meld beginning to penetrate, and that's what made that exciting. Was that you saw the vision? I mean, Tibbs had already obviously scrapped the original vision of develop Cat and Wiggins. It's like, no, we're not.
And so did Jimmy, and Jimmy had started becoming more the forefront of it. Yeah.
Exactly, and it was like,
we can't talk too much about Tom Thibodeau and Jimmy Butler when we're talking about how things are good right now with the Wolves, but it was similar, right?
Oh, well, I mean, what it was is, again, it's a type of thing where you got quickening. It wasn't like a giddy up, carried away kind of thing, because you knew they'd be good. But one of the things you did notice about that team was that they had a clue that felt like a durable clue. It felt like something like, this is a foundation you could build on, because we didn't know, how much of a quote unquote crater Jimmy Butler would become.
Yeah, no idea.
A great heel turn, but and also, in the process, Butler deciding to throw in the towel also exposed Cat, and I mean, it did damage to their psyches, because he was basically saying, these guys are quitters. I'm not sticking around. And Tibbs essentially co-signed the whole thing with his body language and his behavior. It's like, yeah, you're right. You come back. I need you, but I can't deal with these motherfuckers either. It's like, it really was kind of like the vibe, wasn't it?
No, it was. Yeah.
And so, but before all that happened, when Jimmy was putting his mark on the team in a manner not that dissimilar to what he did with the Heat. He couldn't do it with the Sixers either. Couldn't do it with the Bulls that much. But it was a period like, I don't know how high they can go, but they could go better than I thought they could go.
Exactly.
And that is the feeling that you want. Any fan wants. I've always said the quickening seasons are as much fun as the championship seasons. It's a different thing. It's more like
maybe not more fun than that championship season, but like a contending.
Well, I mean, for me, quite frankly, the championship seasons. I've never had one, obviously, but also I'm just saying that it's when a team that I like is going all the way to the finals and winning the finals, and that has happened. I mean, obviously, it happened in my childhood with the Celtics, but there are teams you adopt aside from the team you're covering as like this. I want to see this team be full flower. I want to see this team get everything it seems to be striving for, because I like the way they play.
And this team's kind of starting to feel like that.
Yeah. Right? And also, I mean, but there's a satisfaction that it's like the difference between a marriage and a flame, a championship team is a marriage relationship. A quickening team is a flame. It's like your infatuation, you're head over heels in love. Whereas when you're married, you're in love and you're deeply in love, but your head and your heels have stopped spinning,
Yeah. It's kind of like what I want to talk about today is, what is contributing to this, whatever this is, feeling that we're describing, only 7, because it's only 7 games into the season.
I know, incredible.
And I think like we are not, the two of us are not normally very reactionary, and like I would think we try not to be, but it seems we are reacting more, and we are saying this team has and probably will exceed our expectations. And for us, I think, to have changed that point of view in 7 games says a lot. Like, we need to dig into what that is, and we know it's the defense. And then there's also, I think what, for me at least, what is contributing to it is I'm seeing these different areas that seem very attainable to get better at. over these final 75 games of the year, and that hints at sustainable ceiling, right?
Yeah, and also I'm seeing areas that I thought were going to be things that had to be overcome, areas of weakness that are not weak.
Right.
Nas's defense, Slow-Mo's defense at the 3.
Yep.
I mean, these are things I thought, how in the world are they going to play defense with such a slow front court? Well, the answer is extremely well. I mean, that's insane.
I know.
And that's the kind of thing that makes you go, oh, wow. I mean, this is, they figured something out that, is a synergistic thing. And, and add to everything else, the roster construction, if Gobert is playing at such a high level and is actually leading on defense, setting an example on defense, then the whole dynamic changes. I mean, in the locker room the other night, Ant and Nas, who wouldn't give Rudy the time of day in the locker room last year, are ribbing him about his clothing choices. I mean, it's like,
I might have contributed to that because I was saying it was he was wearing the big bell-bottom black pants, and I said to Nas, I was like, "Did Rudy take your pants?" Because that's what Nas after the first. Yeah, that was funny.
But that shirt too was the thing that but I mean, the point being is that Ant wanted to specifically include Rudy in a locker room razzing, and that is a sign of affection. That is a sign of, hey, this guy is my teammate. We went into that locker room last year, and Gobert was staring at his phone. I said Gobert was like the stepfather in that locker room. He not only was the adult in the room, he was not related, And so it really felt like that. It really felt like Rudy was, every now and then might look up from his phone and tell people, could you quiet down just a little bit, please?
Turn the volume down, Anthony.
Yeah, exactly. So, there really is this, and by the way, during that COVID period, I'm not religiously in the locker room, and I don't go pregame, but postgame, to get the temperature of a team in the locker room is extremely informative. It doesn't have to be anything that is purposeful by anybody. It's just normal interaction. And they spend so much time there that even when the media is there and they're trying to check themselves, they still have habits, interactions. It's a social milieu that has already been established, and our presence changes it a little, but not enough to totally knock it out of what it really is. And so it's really nice to get in there. And when the league was talking about, limiting access and all this other stuff, especially for beat writers, I mean, guys like John and Chris who need these quotes, and Jace. And it isn't so much, I don't do all that much quoting, but just hanging out, being in there, trying not to fall over the equipment bag. Is it's great to have that there.
Britt fell over the equipment bag last year.
Oh man, it was a senior moment. I have never in my life thought I was going to catch myself and not caught myself.
Ant tried to catch you, but he was sitting in
it was at the other side of the room, but he was like, no, he left his chair. I had a great affection for him at that moment, because I really did feel like he was literally concerned for my well-being.
That was
Anyway,
that was not the same vibe in that locker room. That was a moment where
no one was razzing me at that time. They were thinking the old man might have bought the farm.
Yeah. That is okay.
But having that whole deal, Rudy is now a guy that is respected in manners that are probably the most important ways, which is that I like playing with this dude right now, and that is enormously important.
Yes. It's and because it has, I said this yesterday, whenever I was with Kyle, it really stood out to me after the Boston game, how Rudy talked about them sitting down in training camp and, quote unquote, deciding to be a defensive team, which again, sounds like a platitude, sounds like cliche or whatever. But, you look at these 7 games, you talk to some of the guys and you just again, getting the vibe that you're talking about.
Right.
It seems like they absolutely, as a group, did buy into that. And what I said to Kyle was that's just like such an article of faith in Rudy, given what they had seen from Rudy the year before, and the ability for Rudy to deliver upon this to deliver when they've given him this platform to say, like, this is going to be the identity of our team. You're our best defender. Like, we are behind you. We are going as you go. For Rudy to step up into that and take that and be as good as he has been defensively these first 7 games is a really cool sort of gamble that the team took. And, he delivered the running spades or whatever to make it
wouldn't
hit.
have happened if he didn't meet the schemes halfway.
Yes.
That was the real key, in my opinion, is that,
get into that.
He was a stubborn dude last year. I mean, if you remember, it's like he consistently wanted his guards to know when to leave the man to him and when to stay with their man. And he just was, what it was, quite frankly, is he was spoiled by 8 years of everybody in an organization knowing what he wanted and needed and delivering it to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
And I think he was frustrated by the idea that didn't happen to him. And that's somewhat on Gobert, but it's also pretty understandable, that, if that's all he came over from France as like a 21-year-old kid. And after 2 or 3 seasons, he was the face and the epicenter of the franchise. And so
won defensive players of the year because of it, got hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts because of it. And
everything revolved around him. And when one guy, Donovan Mitchell, kind of started to pull at that thread, and it became a little bit different vibe. It became, we're kind of like 2 teams now. We have a Rudy precept of things to go with and a Donovan Mitchell thing to go with. There was tension and it didn't work as well. And so the idea that Rudy had such a bad year, some of it was physical, without a doubt. He clearly is so much better physically now that you can see that literally the body conditioning was a big part of it. But some of it obviously too was mental, and that he just couldn't help but be disappointed. And he was getting slagged every day in social media. All the things he would do well suddenly were not doing nearly as well because his teammates weren't cooperating in what he thought should be the way to go. And he really had to reorder himself to some extent. And I remember, one of the last practices before the regular season started, and I talked to him about, the hybrid schemes of Utah schemes and Minnesota schemes, and him saying, it's not really that different for me. I'm still Rudy Gobert. I'm still going to, and I'm thinking, oh my God, we're going to get back to this. And it became, like, in my season preview, probably the biggest question I had. And I was dubious. I mean, I posed it as a question, but what I was really kind of posing it as is this is an obstacle.
Yeah.
Rudy is probably not going to meet the schemes in the middle. He's not going to roam. He's not going to do things. When push comes to shove, he's going to want to stay in the paint. He's going to want people to know when to leave their man and to leave him alone, and when they have to have responsibility. Only Jaden McDaniels had ever really figured that out last year, in my opinion. Conley, obviously, but that's not as important because they don't really share a assignment in the paint.
I think it's the length around him that makes Rudy feel safe leaving. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it is, I don't know how much this pops on TV because I've been obviously watching more of the games in person because I've been home so much. When you do go to a game and it is like a half court defense possession, just look at how little space there is for teams to navigate kind of that 16-foot radius, if I'm saying that correctly, like around it's hard to pass through the Timberwolves defense in the lane, even when Rudy isn't there.
Right.
And I think Rudy realized that and was like, okay, I can leave, and
then he got into it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I love about it is that Rudy's trying to block 18-footers, and I just think that the crazy thing about that is if you up fake and try to dribble past Rudy, it's such a detriment that people can recover. I mean, there really is. Not only are the Wolves, and you're talking about wingspans here, not only height but width. There really is a phenomenal amount of size taken away from the offense, but also the ability to either negotiate switches or hedge on screens or go through screens, depending on who the personnel is, has been really, I mean, the Wolves are playing a bruising physical defense. They are playing like the teams that I have always admired in other markets, teams that take the game to you on defense. That's what I loved about the Vando Pat Bev thing. Right. But they didn't have what made that kind of even more fun was that they were gambling, because if they didn't get what they wanted on the perimeter,
corner three.
And now it's like there's not that much gambling involved. There's really it's both a natural flow and a fundamental cover to each other. And
it's interesting, right? To like the corner three thing, like in particular, when they give up a corner three this year, and if you see Finch on the sideline, he's pissed.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, in that scheme they were playing pre-Rudy, there was kind of like an acknowledged like, we're going to give some of those up because we're, like you said, like we're gambling. And that all leads into this, like, I don't know, like ability to believe you can be more precise, right? And take away as many. Like I think Finch in this group believes they can take away everything, right? They're not going to do it every possession,
and
or
corner
even every
three
game.
actually remains, especially left side corner three remains if there is a weakness on this defense, and it's often because Rudy is in the left block, and so getting out there. I'm not saying he's Rudy Gobert is going to be fantastic at sealing the corner on rotations. On the other hand, getting the ball to that rotation without a lot of pre-designed ball movement is not easy for offenses. And so,
well, it's not scripted. It's not like Trae Young and Luka Doncic, again, to 2 years ago, they know, like, okay, I'm in the high quad running a pick and roll here. If I go left and yank it out far left here, Nas or Cat or whatever, along with the guard, and come up with me. And it is going to be, if I'm going to hit the roller, the low man's going to slide over to take that. And then the left corner three is there. The smart players knew there was this pattern way to break that scheme. The Wolves scheme now is unpatterned. You don't know, or I don't know what X plus Y plus Z equals anymore. I did under that scheme, or we do under when it's just straight drop coverage, right? Like what you can get to.
Right.
It's unclear if I was coaching against the Wolves right now, what I would target offensively to get after, and I could say every other season I've ever covered this team, I could have given you a do this. Like that is the basic, offensive plan for breaking this team's defense open. Sorry, we're going a little bit long here before our first break. Let me get that, and then let's get into what this defenses look like, numbers, and a little bit more there. As always, want to let you guys know that Falling Knife is an option for going to watch the games here locally with the big screen on, or the projector screens on, sound on there. It's been a homestand. They're going to San Antonio, San Francisco, Phoenix over the next, whatever that is, 5 or 6 days. And I'm assuming not many Wolves fans are going to be traveling to that game. You're going to be in town. There is a different and more fun feel to watching this team right now with others. I feel like I'm even just sitting by, you and Chris or whatever at the
Right.
games, like there's something fun about conversing about the game much more than when the opener. I didn't go to Toronto for the opener, and I'm watching that by myself.
Right.
When a
Well,
team
if you're
is
like
at
me,
this
you can't shut up when you watch basketball. I'm constantly talking. It's natural. And I've said this before, but there are people who just basically tell the media not to put me next to them.
I love it.
Some people like it, and some people really, really don't want to hear me constantly talk about every little thing that comes into my mind. I mean, some of it has something to do with what's going on, but every now and then it's like, makes me think of something else. So,
but that's
that socialization.
That's what I'm saying. Like that is actually, I don't mean that as like some sales point here to go watch it. It's more fun to watch the Wolves with people when they're good.
And have either your level of knowledge of the game or a little bit better than your level of knowledge of the game is what's really fun.
Stress test it.
Because then you get to learn things as in the moment of watching.
Totally.
It's so much fun.
Totally. And drinking while you do that is fun too.
That's right, with great beer.
That would be dangerous if we were doing that on Media Row.
Yeah, probably.
But you could do it if you're 21 years old. We've talked about that before. Like, what if we actually put on a headset for this game? I think people would be like, "What the hell are you guys talking about?"
They'd have to fade in and out. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly. So, anyways, just putting that on your radar as always, and maybe this weekend, Friday or Sunday to go check out the Wolves against Wemby and the Spurs, or Steph and the guys in Golden State. So, Following Night Brewing Company, Northeast Minneapolis. All right, Britt. It's going to be interesting to talk about, presuming this team remains very good defensively. It's like I feel like I've already done 4 pods on is this the best defense in the NBA or whatever. It's like, what are the ways we're going to need to find ways to talk about the defense, because that's going to define this team. I mean, they are even now in a great start to the season. They're in a below average offensive team.
Yes.
And there's things obviously we can dig into and pick into there. We can and we will. But the baseline of what makes this a tough opponent night to night is what you need to navigate defensively. And it is, I mean, the numbers right now are nuts. I mean,
they are. And I'm a lot more confident, for the record, saying that this is going to be the best Wolves defensive team in their history. I don't know if that means they're going to be the best Wolves best team in the NBA, because there's a lot of good defenses out there.
Yeah.
Once Milwaukee figures it out, right now they're really floundering, and maybe Lillard for Holiday is a bridge too far, and that they can't achieve that. But the point being that defense is such a team game, and it's so synergistic when it's working, and injuries are obviously can be huge. And but I think that I am confident in saying, I put this in my column, Basketball Reference has this really cool thing where when they have the franchise history for every franchise, they give you like a chart each year of the one-loss record, but also the offensive rating and the defensive rating relative to the rest of the league. And they put it in black.
Like that in your column.
Yeah. And it was the best defense relative to the rest of the league that the Wolves had was in their 03-04 conference finals year. The only time they've gone beyond the first round. They were they allowed 3.2 points fewer per 100 possessions as the average in the league. They didn't finish first. In fact, they might have been 4th or 5th or something. The next best one was 05-06 when Dwayne Casey first came on. And they were 1.7 points stingier than the league average. Well, right now, I don't know what it was after.
I do.
Oh, okay.
I actually, because you wrote it in your column, I looked it up this morning. So it's the Wolves defensive rating right now is 100.5, which is very, very good. The league average defense last year was 115.1. That is a massive gap. But right now, as is always the case at the beginning of the season, offense is down a little bit. So the average is 112.6 for a defensive rating. So that is a 11.1 points per 100 possessions gap. The season prior, the number one defense was 111 and the average defense was 115.1. So the Wolves are this from 1 to median 11.1 last year from, I think it was the Bucks, right? Or no, maybe it was Memphis was number one. It was 111 to the median being 115.1. Like an 11.1 point differential
is nuts.
Last year, the number one defensive team was 9.9 better than the worst defensive team in the league. 30th. I mean, that is the gap. The Wolves are playing better defense right now in margin between them and the median team, bigger than the first to worst defense last season. And that is nuts. Cleveland was 111 and San Antonio was 120.9. And that is just a massive gap and small.
And they're gapping the second place team, which is the Knicks, is like 2.5 points. And the Knicks,
it's even more than that now.
They punt. Oh, is it now more?
Yeah.
They punted. The Knicks have no offense, It's like
well, the Wolves are 100.5. Boston is 104.2 as number 2.
So Boston is now ahead of the Knicks. Okay.
And New York is
so 4 points better than second place. Wow, that's something.
That is. And it's
and let me say one thing more on this is that Utah and New Orleans, especially New Orleans now, Utah and New Orleans both, Utah I think is tanking. New Orleans is racked by injuries. But Boston and Denver are great offensive teams.
Mm-hmm.
And Boston came in here doing the same thing on offense that the Wolves are doing on defense, not quite to the same extent, but they were more than 4 points or 5 points better than the second best offense, Dallas, coming into that game against the Wolves. They were an offensive juggernaut. And the Wolves, after the game, Jaylen Brown was saying no team has put that kind of pressure on us. This is a team, the Celtics, who have like 4 guys who are rugged, ISO, good players. They rely on it a little bit too much, obviously, but they just have a lot of weapons on offense that are strong and long and are really good. And with Kristaps on the team now, they can space the floor with 5 out very easily, which theoretically, before the season started, we would say that's going to kill this, Nas, Ant, Slow-Mo, Gobert. How are they?
Gobert. Gobert guarded Porzingis out there.
And when he didn't, Nas was out there. Slow-Mo was out there. So that if Porzingis did the up fake and ran, guess who he's coming into?
Yeah.
Or the first block of the game that Rudy had on Gobert, it was a pick and roll with Nas getting beat off the pick and roll, except that Ant had the low wall and a low man and was coming over. Porzingis saw Ant coming over and determined he was going to get a layup over Ant. And Rudy's on the weak side and got the block. Porzingis didn't even know he was there because he was already dealing with Nas at the top of the key. It was, it's length and covering up other people. And Porzingis frequently in that game just looked bewildered, didn't he?
Yeah.
There were a couple of times where he just sat on the floor and, implored that somebody should have gotten the foul on that, when it was clearly no
weird.
Foul.
Is weird as a 5 or a 7 footer. We've seen this with Carl a lot. Like, it's bizarre, I think, for a 7 footer to be guarded by someone smaller than them. Like, not the biggest player on the other team.
Right.
Because one, you're just not really used to it. But the part I think you're really not used to is like, all right, if I beat my man, now there's a bigger guy there waiting for me. Because normally, like Cat his whole life been guarded by 5s or whatever. He's like, all right, if I beat Valanciunas, there's not a Porzingis behind me, which
is what the Clippers with Batum on him. And then Zubac is the guy who they frustrated Cat like no other, you know.
As did Kyle Anderson in the playoff series when he was guarding Cat in Memphis. But we're talking about now the Wolves are able
to do the other
that.
thing.
I mean, it's obviously what they've done to Jokic to, you know, as much as you could have relative success against Jokic, that they did last
3
season.
assists in over 30 minutes is really, you know.
It's that I think that is outside of scheme, just like you're just playing, right? You know, you're just playing basketball. That weapon that they have of Rudy's ability to impact the ball when he is not in the primary, he's not the primary defender, he's not in the primary action. That's hard, man. And what better example than Jokic having struggled against that and
not having his outlets. I mean, Jokic always says, okay, somebody's on me. Who's open? All right.
Well,
Aaron Gordon is going to destroy any other power forward when he goes up for a shot, you know, and it's Rudy Gobert instead, you know. And credit Cat, you know, to the extent that Cat stayed in front of him. And Cat gets up for Jokic. Cat remembers when he and Jokic, that was a real debate about who was better.
For sure.
Right? 2 MVPs later, we know. But, you know, Cat still remembers that.
Actually, as much as like a lot of the offensive stuff hasn't been there and has been frustrating, like I genuinely think Carl is very bought into the concept of being a defensive team.
It is the underrated aspect of Cat's season. And then and then it extends to the backcourt. I mean, my goodness, Mike Conley. I didn't think Mike Conley had a good game. I thought that the Celtic guards. I mean, what it was, we saw Drew Holiday crab dribble him down and score over him a couple of times. We're thinking, all right, Mike Conley just isn't physical enough to play this game, you know, against these big wings. And then I listened to Mazzulla post game, and he was saying, you know, it was really tough. We were trying to separate Gobert and Conley on pick and rolls. Obviously, for the reason that, you know, you get Gobert to commit, and then you only have to deal with Conley.
But Mike's not separating.
And Mike is not. He is hedging perfectly, getting deflections, getting in the way. And you went back and looked and showed me some clips. I went back and looked after that and just saw Mike Conley was not playing heroic defense. What he was doing was being a delayer of execution. And as a result,
I like
that execution was not able to be completed because he was getting help. And Rudy is one of the helpers, obviously. Those guys have worked together. And then you had pointed out, you know, how the inverse, how they were cross-matching, trying to foster those cross matches, especially on Conley, and how Conley said to you in the locker room, we're used to this. You know, I mean, they did this to us in Utah, and, you know, it's not easy to do. But if anybody's going to be able, if any 6'1" and 7'1" guy are going to be able to know how to cross match, it's those two.
Well, they'd have experience against it. Yeah, that was to Mike's point. And Mike said, you know, it's good. We're going to have to practice that a lot. And I think that.
And there'll be new wrinkles because, you know, that's such an obvious, if you can get that matchup. See, that's the other part of it, though.
They're just going to be targeted with scouts way more, you know.
And scouts are going to have to try to figure out how to stop this fly around, though, or take advantage of this fly around. And I think the low-hanging fruit there is probably Nas and Slow-Mo and Cat, like I was saying, because I can't believe that they can continue to have like a sub 100 defensive rating together on the floor. Right now it's 95.5, or it was until the New Orleans game. You know, that's just ridiculous. You know, that's just, you know, none of those guys are great defenders.
Not to overly simplify it, but like if you look at what's different, it's the rebounding too. I mean, like there's some capability to chase, right? You know, Nas has more capability to chase. I think Kyle has actually been able to handle, and even at times been a defensive like wing stopper, which kind of goes against some of my skepticism about him going to the three. Like that's where, like they've been capable just in concept and guarding their guy, but they've been ending those possessions. And I mean, that's the That's the thing that stands out. 26th in defensive rebounding last season, 12th thus far this year. And like, honestly, that 12th should go up.
Right.
Like, and it's the same thing with turnovers generated. They're 8th in turnover frequency. And last year they were 5th. So what, like, that is, I would say, more likely
stopping
than not.
Transition is because that is the area they will remain vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they are.
I'm talking about generating turnovers, though. They generated the 5th most last year, and they're at 8th right now. So I say that to mean, like, I think, one, the defensive rebounding has taken a big step up, but only to 12th. You're big as hell. Like, you should be top 10 in that. I think that gets better.
Okay.
I mean, but you're right. If I could, I would think that if I didn't know the last 2 seasons.
And also, I think that you have to give up something if you're going to be so physical. I think if you are basically suffocating people on ball or suffocating follow-up, suffocating the second action, people are going to be out of position. And I'm fine with that. I actually think that I think that Conley and Ant as a backcourt are very good rebounders. And I wouldn't have said that about Ant. Again, I mean, let me know when we want to get into Ant, because that's going to just be just
well,
a fantastic rave. I mean,
well, let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball, which I think that has some room for growth too, right? There's some obvious things I think we can talk about with more and better 3-point shooting, more and better ball movement. What Ant, I think, has steadily progressed on over the course of the season. And then also just some fewer turnovers, some fewer offensive fouls. That's how you raise up from where you are. It's not kind of some of the minutia, the attention to detail offensively, but the macro detail is Ant and what he's able to deliver offensively to keep this team, even when the 3-point shooting isn't there, even when Carl is struggling, he's able to keep this offense in and of himself at at least league average level, which again hints at something higher coming. I guess this is just my way of saying, what has Ant done to provide that offensive stability?
Ant is becoming a glue guy in a crazy way. And that's another thing, where you think about the giddy up idea of, like, we're on a spree right now. I have no idea whether you can keep this up. But I was thinking to myself, these last 4 games in November, they're 4-0, okay? I pulled net rating stats on Ant for the last 4 games off NBA.com or on-off stats. He's been on the court for 139 minutes over the last 4 games. They're 4-0. Offensive rating 120.8. Defensive rating 90.2. His net rating over the last 4 games is plus 30.7. 58 minutes off the court for Ant. Offensive rating 95.3. Defensive rating 109.6. They are minus 14.6 when he's off the court. The difference between Ant being on the court and being off the court in the last 4 games has been 45.3 points per 100 possessions.
It's nuts.
And raw numbers, 29.8 points per game, 56.1 field goals, although he's hitting less than 30% of his threes. He's 7 for 24. He's getting to the line more than 6 times a game and hitting 80% of his free throws. He has 0 offensive rebounds in 4 games and 22 defensive rebounds, which means he's getting back. He is getting back. He's not caring about the glass. He is going to the glass on defense. Right. He has 22 assists, but 16 turnovers. So again, to your point, bad 3-point shooting, a lot of turnovers. but it doesn't matter because his fundamentals on the stuff that has always been kind of his problem to some extent has been so good. He's got 7 steals and 2 blocks, kind of pedestrian. But what really matters is you can't point to a stat that indicates why he's 45 points good for this team. It's because he's
the glue,
engaged in all the things that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 22 years old, and this is good. This is a peak. Obviously, if this isn't a peak, if this was more or less business as usual, then get the MVP trophy ready. I mean, it's not going to be this way, but
how close can it be to that?
Yeah. Exactly. For the last 4 games,
mm-hmm.
he's been Superman. He's been 90. When Ant is on the floor, the defense gives up 90 points. When Ant's been on the floor, the offense scores almost 121 points. And then it flips. They're 95-3 and 109-6. I mean, that's just crazy. And obviously he plays with the best players most of the time. But Finch also leaves him out there with that second unit. Yeah. And especially that front court I was telling you about with, the Cat, Nas, slow-mo. Sometimes it's Nas at the, well, actually, no, it isn't. It is that way. And Anna's out there for a lot of that. And I think that's one of the reasons their defensive rating is so good.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to see what he did on Tatum, and it's great to see what he did for McDaniels dishing the ball. And it's great to see him seize the moment to win that Boston game. But what gets me is you cannot have a 45 point per 100 possession differential without doing all the non-dramatic glitzy things really well too.
Well, here's the thing. He and they passed the ball and moved the ball all preseason, and it looked like a dangerous offense in the context of the preseason. And you assumed that a lot of that would hold as the season started. Okay, there's some lights and maybe some things change, but they, and in particularly Ant, just stopped passing the ball at the first couple of games.
That's very true. It was very aggravating, right?
And now what is happening is I thought Ant, particularly last night against New Orleans, was extremely intentional about ball movement, and oftentimes that ball movement is in place of a difficult 2-point shot or a contested step back 3-point shot or whatever that might be. And to replace bad shots with ball movement is going to, I think, allow this team to help take care of what I think is probably its biggest offensive weakness, which is just shooting. Shooting around the bigs or whatever, just overall floor spacing and shooting. And against New Orleans in the first half, when the game was in the balance, it wasn't a blowout yet, that they were generating good 3-point looks. And I found that to be extremely valuable. And it hints to me as at a higher ceiling for what this offense, who again has been largely pedestrian throughout the season, of what they can be.
Well, I mean, you look at Cat's shooting percentage and Ant's shooting percentage from outside the arc, and those are your heavy hitters. I mean, Slow-Mo had 42% and Conley had 43% last year.
Right.
You can't expect that to sustain. Conley does seem to be a very reliable 3-point shooter, and he's great on that high screen with Gobert. It is a weapon, but at the end of the day, Ant and Cat, and somebody said this, about when Cat is shooting from outside, everything opens. That's that really is the difference. And to the point where I groan, even when he scores on one of those running layups, I'm thinking, that means he's going to start to go to it. And I want to see 7 or 8 threes. I don't care if it's only 2 or 3 makes, because if he keeps doing it and he forgets about how am I looking, and he's in a groove all of a sudden. I mean, Cat's due for a 7 or 8 made threes game.
Sure.
And when that happens, I hope it's against a good team. We don't waste it. I hope it's against somebody who, like Golden State. I hope that, one of those 2 Warriors games, if Cat can get 35 on 21 points of threes, then they'll beat Golden State, I think.
No, I agree. I think it would be very empowering, not only for Cat, but for the offense. Because again, the first half, the offense looked pretty lethal. And I felt
14 threes in the half.
Exactly. I asked Finch about that after the game, and I asked Carl about it in the locker room afterwards too, of just like, how much are you targeting it? How much is it how much are you feeling you need to have more 3-point volume? And both of them kind of were like, just good shots. Here's Finch on the threes and kind of the ball movement that leads to it.
You guys haven't been a big taking 3-pointers team bunch in the first half tonight. When you are taking and making them, what do you see that open up for the offense?
Yeah, I thought we really did a good job of making the early pass to the open shooter. We generated a lot of looks. We kind of had a feeling where we knew where they were going to come from. Sometimes you fight the game, but we didn't. We took what the game gave us. Then it opened up a lot of, kind of just space in general. But yeah, I thought just our awareness of what the defense was doing was high, and the ability to make the right play. I mean, we had, I think it had 8 assists at half or something. Nikhil finished with a bunch.
I guess I don't have the next question in there as well too. But then I think Jace asked about, Ant just passing and what that is opening up. It's like, if Ant is passing and those skip passes that he's finding, in addition to some more reliable shot making there, now you kind of like are getting body blows with the defense, and the offense with like a 3-point avalanche can kind of be the knockout punch. That's what I think.
It stands to reason that a player of great gravity who can throw a good skip pass will get an open shooter. I mean, that's just logic, right?
It's the Luka, it's the Trey.
If 2 guys are on me and I whip the ball to the other side of the court, even if some guy is remarkably good at chasing that pass, if that pass is going to somebody who sees a man being totally left open, it's the second pass that gets it. Right. But the point being is a very self-aware skip passer who also happens to be a renowned all-star scorer is going to be great for your offense. And Ant was plus 35 last night. You don't do that without good decision making. You don't luck into that unless most of your other teammates are in the 30s too. Right. I think Gobert may have been like 24 and Cat may have been 27 or something. But Ant was the team leader in plus minus for a reason. I mean, he's doing the right things.
He's contributing to the elite defense, and he's stabilizing the mediocre offense.
That's a very good way to put it. Right.
Rudy empowers the defense, but is, just an excess person on offense a lot of time. And that's not to take away from his.
No, I know. And Finch, I love Finch. Yeah. Finch loves to not say that. He loves to say the opposite, which is that Rudy's gravity is, I got to tell you, any team that is doubling Rudy in the post is playing into the Wolves' hands. I mean, I don't think that,
I don't know, man. You're not liking those little Rudy dimes now. He's doing his little like forearm flings all over the place.
I mean,
he's passing with some
I love the
flair.
forearm flings. That's a great. That is great. It's almost like the sling, the cat sling. Although it's fortunately a little less unbridled. He
looks like a shortstop, like turning 2. He's like, oh, there's Nikhil in the corner.
That's right.
And what I'm actually kind of serious about that, because I don't know how like great of a basketball play that is. Like, probably sometimes that's going to be a turnover,
but it sends a message.
It sends a message and it signals the confidence. And it's another anecdote of what I think is the biggest development of the entire season, that I think we started tracking back in training camp, is comfort and confidence from Rudy Gobert on levels that, quite frankly, I've never seen before, because it didn't happen last season. And with Utah, I wasn't watching it enough to know what that felt like.
And Utah wasn't using Rudy.
No,
I mean, remember when it was a big deal that, Rudy's going to come out and guard Cat tonight because Cat burned him the day before, you know? But that's what he did. And now it's like,
I remember that.
If we were to do that,
they played Utah back-to-back nights. Cat had like 8 threes in the first game, and then I think they
Rudy came out, and it was a big
shut
deal.
Him down.
But it was like black and white. It was like Rudy's going to do this, and Rudy's going to do this, because Utah had its schemes. And
I remember, man, I went to Utah's shoot around that morning before the second game. We asked Rudy questions, and he was like, "You'll see, it'll be different tonight. We're going to do some things different tonight." And I'm like,
But the difference and the reason why Finch is, in my mind, should be given a lot of credit for what's happening now is he convinced Rudy. I think one of the ways he convinced Rudy is this team needs the flexibility to not get caught in its one-trick pony excellence. And if there's a definition for what happened to Utah, it's that what they did so well, a playoff opponent has time to scout it, pick at it, and eventually exploit it. And especially if it's a magician like Luka with the ball or whatever, if you run into the wrong personnel matchups, what is encouraging about what the Wolves are doing right now is that they can fly around or they can stay home. And not that they're not flying around when they're staying home, and not that they're not being fundamentally good when they're flying around, but they have a broad-based, more versatile approach to defense that still involves cohesion, using their length, and putting in enough quickness to make that length ultimately effective. And having guys like Slow-Mo and Conley and Rudy, obviously guys who have been through the wars, who know what defense is about, and teaching guys like Ant and Cat and Nas how to do it, is all it's that, if you want to tip your hat, I just did to Finch, I'll tip it to Tim Conley right now. He's gotten the personnel, even with Shake Milton not having a good season at all thus far, and all of a sudden being taken off the ball, which was news to him in the locker room. But this is an interesting roster. This is a roster that can withstand, I think, losing their most pure point guard in J-Mac after Conley, and they can be okay.
It's a razor's edge thing, I would imagine, as a coach, to try and empower Rudy without placating to him.
Right.
And obviously we know in Minnesota last year, it was placating, right? It
had to be. They had so much invested that if Rudy had just shit the bed, in mentally, physically, he clearly was out of sorts.
But by placating that, they shit the bed for him. They said we're going to play this way
really
defensively,
right? Yep.
And then offensively they placated to him, like, be happy to be in Minnesota. We're going to give you.
We're going to expand your game. Yeah,
exactly.
Oh my God. Right.
And so much of that is gone. But I even think about it from the Utah standpoint, right? Utah was a great team, so I don't want this to be taken as like Quinn Snyder.
Yeah, they won 60 games.
Yeah, I don't want to be saying that Quinn Snyder wasn't coaching well, but there was an element of that team as well that was placating towards Rudy. It was obsessed with maximizing him while maybe sometimes ignoring how he fit in the greater group of 5 players. And that led to a ton of regular season wins. But without the empowerment, like effective empowerment of Rudy in a team scheme, it cost them in the playoffs. All right. So this is just a different way of saying, like, we need to learn and know we need to know how to do multiple different things during the regular season so we can be able to do it in the postseason. Quinn Snyder didn't, or to the extent that I know, did not do that to a heavy degree. They tried to develop an identity during the regular season. They did it over and over again to get as good as they could at that. And then once it really got tested in the playoffs, it broke. The idea here is Rudy is doing enough different things that it would empower him for a playoff series. So it isn't that Clippers thing that happened in his final year in Utah, where it's 7 Terrence Mann, whatever corner threes against him in that sort of way. And I would say that's my hat tip to Finch, is navigating that, at least thus far. Actually, probably doing a bad job of it last year, but learning from that and finding something to build on and establish as a foundation that could really help them when they are playoff.
Yeah, I think they were frankly surprised, as were we all to some extent, but they were really surprised because they had such an investment in it, how badly it went when it went bad. And I mean, I'll say this first about Quinn Snyder. I think he's an excellent coach.
Yeah.
I think that he did tailor a lot of things to Rudy's strengths that made them such a winning team, especially in the regular season. And I will also say that I'm really liking what he's doing with the Atlanta Hawks this year, who, by the way, beat the Wolves in a game that, you know, and that it's not the first time this season or the last that the Hawks totally erupted. They beat the Pelicans that way. They beat somebody else that way, but they suddenly just surge, you know? And so credit to Quinn Snyder. But to back up your point about placation, Donovan Mitchell is a terrible defender for a reason. Donovan Mitchell never really had to learn how to play defense because it was Rudy's job. And Rudy accepted the fact that it was his job, and Donovan Mitchell kind of accepted that fact too. And so there is a way where Rudy being Rudy creates bad team defense if you're not careful, because Rudy wants to do it all and he's really good at it. But one guy doing it all just isn't as good as 5 guys trying to do things together. It just isn't.
No, absolutely. And that requires some sort of mind meld from Conley to Finch to, you know, the leaders of the team, who I guess, I don't know how to define that exactly. Maybe the starters are the leaders of this team. I don't.
Well, and getting Conley and slow-mo and getting
Kyle too.
I mean, those guys, they understand. I mean, Conley came up through Memphis, slow-mo came up through San Antonio and Memphis. If you want pedigree in terms of sacrifice for the team, you know, those are great places to come from. And so those were smart acquisitions. And you know, this is twice in 3 years, full years of coaching, that Chris Finch has put together a defense that maximizes his personnel, and hats off to him. I mean, I don't know. It's early yet, obviously. And I understand that we're making some assumptions and pronouncements that are very, very premature.
Yeah. No, but it is interesting in all their answers. Like what, you know, we're covering a winning team right now. So we're saying this is going well. Why is this going well? What I do appreciate about Finch and pretty much all of their answers is not reveling in what is going well. Every answer by Finch or whoever is followed up with, how do we sustain it? You know, almost to an annoying point.
And we
have
I know that. And we have to do better at, you know, and he says we have to do better at, and that's good coaching. And that's also, it's a little bit different than 2 years ago, where Finch knew that things were going about as well as they could go, and 46 wins out of that roster was really good. 46 wins out of this roster is maybe about at expectation level, or maybe slightly below. I mean, you and I both called like 46 to 48, right around in that realm. And they're now looking like they could be higher than that. I think that Finch and Conley and everybody know, and maybe the locker room hopefully know, that if they do keep working on it, that the ceiling is higher than it was 2 years ago. and
Yeah.
and it also
Which was the whole original idea, right?
but there is now a pathway that we didn't see. I mean, saying we're going to give Rudy, I remember you and I talking about the Wolves having a top 5 offense that first year with Rudy there, because we saw D'Lo and Ant and Rudy and Cat. I mean, oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
and little did we know that it wasn't going to be the defense that stymied Cat and Rudy. And do you remember that?
No, it was going to be the defense.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, the defense was good though.
Yeah.
Those guys together, and it was the offense. They couldn't play offense.
Yes.
And it was interesting to me. One little weird thing, and I know I'm kind of jumping around a little, but when I asked Kat the other night, you guys have worked it out, you and Rudy, and Rudy being in the dunker spot gives you room to move around and everything. He said, well, agree to disagree. Rudy in the dunker spot. Sometimes I want to be in the, it's like, okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You're still,
they're still navigating that.
That's kind of a weird take. I mean, in my opinion, if I'm Kat, I want Rudy to be in the dunker spot. Yeah, there are people down there, but you don't go up the gut very often. And when you go up the gut, it's usually on a side feed. It's not off the bounce. You're off the bounce when you're going left baseline mostly.
Yeah.
So Rudy in the right dunker spot and you left baseline, I don't know. I just feel like
I think Carl would prefer Rudy could just stand in the corner.
I think Carl would prefer that Rudy sits during the offense and plays during the defense. That's
Well, to be fair, it makes it harder. Rudy's presence on offense makes it harder for Carl to do.
But if those threes start to rain in, man,
mm-hmm.
then it's not at all.
That's where it has to start. And it kind of did last night. I think Carl was 4 for 5 from 3. I think at least 2 of them were from the corner. That's what I was saying the other day is like, let's start there. Like,
exactly.
What are basic things we can do that are bankable?
Let's get some traction in Carl's psyche. That's what we need. We need something where Cat can say, and what's crazy is he hasn't been bragging much about his defense, as you noted, and I totally co-signed, has been very good.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. The turnovers can pile up, the fouls can pile up. If both of those things go away when he's just standing out by that arc and letting that beautiful stroke take over, if he's hitting 40% of his threes, then a lot of sins are forgiven.
No, absolutely. And I think, and I might save the offensive foul thing that Finch talked about yesterday for Jays, because we're up here over an hour. But I think the broader point is, Carl finding that comfort zone. And I do think last night he found the comfort zone. All that got in the way was the foul trouble dysregulating his own rhythm, right? And that was, a lot of those were offensive fouls in that sort of way. If he can keep his rhythm by lowering his fouling, and again, I'm going to say empower his offense by shooting more threes more effectively, there's another level to this. That's what I'm saying. Like that alone, if you can hit on like 60% of that, because you're hitting about 6% of that,
right?
The cat juice right now.
The NBA 3-point shooting champion 2 years ago in the those skill things at the All-Star game.
That's why he's a good player.
And the career 39%.
Yes, that's what it is.
Shooter from deep.
He also scares the hell out of teams up there. Be a threat, so you scare them. Right. Even if there's this internal, like, I want to drive or whatever, be the threat. Be the threat in the corner. They are not going to leave Karl Anthony Towns alone in the corner.
Absolutely.
They are not. And that is going to, you got other drivers on this team. You got Mike, who can get to the middle for the floater. Obviously, Ant all the way. Like, I've thought about it since you said the, like, sublime role player thing about Rudy last week when we talked. Rudy's being a sublime role player. And I think that started as the foundation. and now that's building into just stardom. Can Karl start and catch his rhythm by being a sublime role player himself, and then build on that
exactly
from there? If
just get some traction. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes it feels like he wants to get everything back, all the slings and arrows that he's been enduring. All of a sudden, one of these 2 or 3 plays will do it. The other night, he banged home 2 above the break threes and did that little hop as he went back. And I'm thinking, all right, here we go. Here we go. And, and so, it turned out, unfortunately, that a barrage of fouls to end the game was the denouement. But that first half, just stay there, man. Just do your thing, because you are a great shooter. And if at the end of the day, if you're going to have a legacy about Cat, it's going to be that guy, man, if he's left alone from distance, he is a matchup nightmare, because when you start coming at him and really going that way, he can beat you off the dribble, and he can pass if he has time. But it all begins, in my opinion, with that remembrance. Let's remember that this is a 7-footer out there who can just scorch you. I mean, and that was one of the reasons this team had that second quarter boomlet where they went from like 2 down to 20 up or something. And Cat was one of the many guys who nailed a bunch of 3-pointers in that period.
I think this be the last thing. Like, Karl is at this point in time, this month or whatever, this weird sort of redefining of who and what he is, right? The fan base has changed in ways, their views on him, yada, yada, yada. The team has changed and he hasn't had success. Well, here's the thing. Outside of the emotional antics for Karl, the one thing that people always had on him is that they could point to year over year was a below average defender, or average at best defensive center. There is an opportunity for Karl here over not just this season, but let's call it 2-3 seasons, where this team is consistently a top 5 defense. What will happen if that happens?
Exactly.
Is the narrative will change around Karl about being a bad defender into Karl was a bad defender when he had no help around him. And instead, he will be remembered not as a one-way offensive player. Like,
a precondition for that is Kevin Durant. If you remember, Kevin Durant was not regarded as a good 2-way player. And he's had length, but he was considered a little soft, the whole narrative. And, I don't mean to bump you off what you were saying, but
no, this is interesting.
It does make me realize, Durant is universally acknowledged now as an above average defender.
For sure.
And it's because he uses his length and so on and so forth. And he still occasionally gets burned, and he's, but, and winning teams did that for him as much as anything. And even like when Brooklyn fell down on defense, people would say, but Durant's playing good defense. And it was because, he had begun. And not that Cat can necessarily be what Durant is on defense.
Well, there's just some physical limitations about speed. It's like, like in the way that Luka Garza will never be able to be an average defender because of his foot speed. Like Karl will never be able to be an elite defender. But that's never been the request. The request has been be average defensively. And I think within the concept of this, if he's able to navigate guarding some 4s a little bit more, not being someone that you can really pick at. And he helps lead this team in rebounding. That you just have an above average defensive player there, kind of indisputably, who's playing on the number 1 or number 3 defense in the league for multiple years. There's I'm just saying there's like a chance that the perception of who Karl is and is not can change.
And at the very least, his 2 of the last 3 years he's been healthy, or the last 2 years he's been healthy, not last year, he has not sabotaged the defense. He's not sabotaging the defense this year, and he did not sabotage the defense 2 years ago. It was only in that first 6 years of his career when he was constantly in drop.
Yeah.
And Gorgie went in and played the same thing, and everyone, that guy's sabotaging our defense.
Right.
And he was in many ways. And that isn't happening. So I think that can be somewhat of a kind of a reliable barometer that Cat is not going to, you don't have to hold your breath when Cat is playing defense anymore. It isn't like teams are just going to blitz this guy anymore. He has gotten better to the point where, would I say that he's even an average defender? I think overall, perhaps. But when he is in the right scheme and doing the right thing, and he's got quality people around him, he is doing his job and can be a member of looks to be an elite defense.
Yeah, and again, look at Utah. It was an elite defense with clearly not elite.
Derek Favors, for Christ's sake, became an idea of a good defender, even though he was slow as molasses.
Yeah, like even Bogdanovich, like who I think was always like a solid defender, but really he really like pressed up and guarded and was physical in that way because he had Rudy behind him. Like I think Carl is starting to understand
Carl did with Jokic, right?
Exactly, that he has Rudy behind him, and that because the one negative thing of the season is just that Carl hasn't played well. You know, there are things to suggest that he could, and that it will get better, and that it isn't just he doesn't fit in this yada yada yada. He does. He actually is the one that if we want to start really saying giddy up and talk about ceiling with this team, he's absolutely critical to that. There's no way this team goes to the Western Conference Finals even without Carl becoming really fucking good. Unless
Naz Reid does that.
No, that would not happen, man. No, like, you know, I'm a bigger fan of Naz Reid than you are.
I know.
But you remove Karl Anthony Towns from this team and you remove your ceiling. And I'm not saying like long term, there's a whole, what we talk about big seasons down the line and all that. And keeping Carl has the opportunity cost of maybe losing Kyle Anderson and Mike Conley. That's a different conversation. I'm talking about right now. The ceiling leaves if they make one of those trades at this moment for like Emmanuel Quickly and Evan Fournier. You know, like that it just does, you know, and cool. Naz Reid,
when you put it that way.
Well, I see a hell of a lot of those screenshots sent to me.
Right.
And
I know.
I'm like,
yeah. Okay. So you're right in the sense that it's always, you know, all right, you don't like the status quo, show me a better status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, can this status quo elevate beyond even your theoretical status quo? And that's your strongest argument in the vein you're talking about now. And I can, under that context, I can agree with that.
I'm talking about strictly within that context.
Right.
Yes.
And I agree that if Cat can be an above average defender on a very, very good team and a vintage scorer, then this team takes another leap. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we need to learn how to define what the score is because I don't think it's going to be the vintage version of him. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's going to be an adjustment off of it.
But if it's 24 efficient points a game.
I'm just talking about where it comes from.
Yeah,
because
I know it's got to come from deep. Yeah, I agree.
It's not going to be, he was like, whatever, the last vintage version of Carl was the year before Rudy got here and was absolutely dynamic, off the bounce, best big man driver in the league other than Giannis. Right. That's not there. That's not going to be readily available.
The Ryan season where he bombed from deep.
That was what I was going to say earlier. The only other time I felt like this team, there was a 2-week period or something where they were really exceeding expectations was the beginning of that season, which they ended up having the worst record of the league and they got ants afterwards. But remember when they started 3-0 above that?
Yeah.
In my time covering the team, the only 3 times I can really say they felt like they were exceeding expectations was the second half of the Jimmy season before he got hurt, the beginning of Ryan's first full season where Carl was shooting 10 threes a game and making them, even though he was surrounded by nothing. You were like, this is supposed to be the worst team ever. They're 3-0. And then now, what they
you
are.
You went giddy up and the horse went 10 yards and died.
Josh Okogie broke its hoof. Yeah.
That's right. You
took it out back.
That's right.
Trevion Graham shot it in the head. Yeah, it was. Well, he missed 4 times. Then the
Trevion Graham got in the way of the horse, and they both died.
All right. He's Britt Robson again. Check out his column over at MinPost. It's titled "Minnesota Timberwolves Take Down 2 of the NBA's Best with Impressive Defense." It's fun prose that I think encapsulates the fun start to this season, a season that thus far, 7 games in, has exceeded expectations. Though you got plenty of commas in there of like woe or injury or whatever that could change it, but but it's not happening right now.
Okay, as long as we're preening each other, because you've said a lot of nice things about rarity right now. You're going to San Francisco.
I am. Yep.
Yeah. So you're one of the. I mean, podcaster. You're on the road. You're in the locker rooms, not only at home, but when possible on the road. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you've generated a fan base that supports you to the extent that you get to go on the road. And, beat writers with big publications like The Athletic and the Star Tribune do that. But you're a self-funded operation and you're going to go do that. And part of that is just sweat equity from 0 to 60 here. So hats off.
I appreciate it, man. No, it's what better time to. I've taken a lot of trips and been like, I went to Denver last year, the game before the trade deadline. And you remember that game? And D'Lo got ejected and then traded the next day.
Yep.
It was one of those. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? And they lost by like 40 to Denver.
But think of your insights.
Oh, yeah.
What gave you that? What made that trip worthwhile is you were early on the Denver bandwagon because you saw something that you knew that team had gelled to the point. I remember you saying in the first round, Denver is a really, really, the odds on Denver winning a championship are really high, and I think they're going to win it all. You know, and you were looking at the supposed super team in Phoenix, the Clippers with Kawhi healthy at the time, and a Milwaukee team, and all this other stuff. And
it's actually a good reminder because sometimes I think
that Denver trip, you came back saying, Denver is really good. That's what you said, to me at the game. And then when they got in the playoffs, and you were saying this Denver team is being underrated.
There is something about
being there.
And I think when we were talking about that with Denver, I think I've said this on the pod before too. I don't know, and this is kind of the foofy BS stuff, but like you could feel it. You could feel how professional and what that team was about. I actually, the night before that game where the Wolves lost by 40, it was a back-to-back for the Wolves, and they played the Blazers, and I got a media pass for that, but I didn't go to the press conference or anything because whatever. I don't need to talk to Chauncey Billups about anything, And I just sat out there and I just watched like the whole warm-ups, the whole vibe of it. And that, like, you can feel that when a team is upped its professionalism, upped its like we're locked in factor. And I felt that in Denver, and I'm not going to lie, I'm starting to feel parts of that. Maybe not to the same extent with the same it's early feeling. But there's, I'm glad you actually brought that up. Like when, whatever, Jokic would like walk by you and you watch the way that he was interacting with all his teammates and stuff. You're like, okay, this guy's in charge. And I feel like that with Gobert now. In this team's context, and holy shit, I never would have said that a year ago.
Right.
And yeah, I guess to take it full circle, it's why there is the getting swept up in it, right? It's not just what you're seeing on the floor; it's off the floor. It's we have the opportunity to cover and interview these guys, and it is extreme, like you were saying in the locker room. It's extremely telling, and I think it ups our hit rate.
And the first of the 3 long interviews I've done with Finch preseason, I said that Flip Saunders defined chemistry as a pecking order. And he said, he kind of poo-pooed that. And I said, well, how do you define chemistry? He goes, I don't know. And then he said, teams going out on the floor knowing they're going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
man.
And so that's kind of exactly what you're saying. It is. It's a different snapshot in time. It's not, Gobert or Jokic with teammates, but it's like when you're on the floor and you're taking your warm-ups, or you're just prepping, you're getting yourself mentally ready for the game.
Yeah.
Just taking the floor with that kind of isn't even arrogance. It's more like a very quiet assumption that everybody's going to play well, and you're going to do really well.
Yeah, you can vouch for me on this. Like, so there's this, in the pregame media or at shoot around in the morning, there was a bunch of once they knew Zion wasn't going to play or that New Orleans was beat up, there was a ton of questions asked to Nikhil and Kyle and Finch, whatever, who we talked to before the game about, these are the teams that you blew it against last year, blah, blah, blah. And there was such, I don't know, it felt like manufactured fear to me because I didn't have it yesterday going into the game. I was we were talking about like what the spread was like 9.5 or something. I'm like, I actually feel really confident that the Wolves are going to win this game by 10. When I was sitting next to you other times last year and they're playing Detroit. Right. And I'm like, I don't know. I watched Detroit play last night. They play hard, and I don't think the Wolves are going to play hard against them. Maybe they'll beat them.
Or OKC.
Or whatever.
You called an OKC upset.
I'm just saying it's like, I don't want to, because God, I mean, last time after the Atlanta game, we totally fell into they're doing this thing all over again. I don't know how much, I don't know how much 1 week can make a difference. I have substantially less concern about this team's ability, I guess if that's the word, to take teams unseriously, and that it's not gone, right? But it for me, it's not. I don't know. Whatever this feeling is we're talking about has like detoxified a lot of that for me. We ready to wrap this up?
Sure. Yep.
We're done. I just, we've been.
No, I at the end of the day, what we're saying is that I will be surprised if they don't continue to play good defense the entire season, provided they have health. I think that what we're seeing now is a sustainably good playoff team. And we call, high 40s in wins. And I think both of us had not hosting a
we both basically said 47 wins and 5 seed.
Yeah, okay, so not hosting a first round, but staying out of the play-in, which is important. And I think that at the very least has been ratified, barring injury. And I think a lot of questions. I mean, I had a lot of questions about Gobert's adaptability, about Ant being able to fill some of the lesser-known aspects of his game, about the front court being too crowded with Slow-Mo and Nas. I mean, all the questions I really thought were pertinent going in. Conley's health is really the only one that remains in danger to me, right? Most of them thus far have been answered affirmatively. They have, and that can change, but the caveats I'm making now, though, are not stressing caveats. They are acknowledged caveats. Yeah, this could happen, but I'm not saying, hey, this could happen. I feel like
you're in the moment, but not a prisoner of it.
And at the end of the day, expecting the moment to last longer than I did in previous times.
Yeah, right.
And that is chemistry. As Finch said, you see chemistry. And so you see a team that Rudy Gobert is getting razzed on the locker room. That there are different guys on this team stepping up in ways. Nas Reed, quality defender. Anthony Edwards, glue guy on defense. I mean,
we didn't have those on our bingo card.
Are you kidding me?
All right. He's Britt Robson on Twitter, at Britt Robson. Check out his work over at Mimpost. I will be back with Jace tomorrow. I think what I want to do is an episode on things we were wrong about. So I'm going to figure that out sometime this afternoon, which isn't, that sounds like super positive, but it could be, I guess it could be a negative thing that you thought was going to be positive too. I guess I say that to mean there haven't been many seasons where there was so many things that I thought would happen were different for better or for worse. So me and Jace will get into that tomorrow. That'll be the Friday show. Like Britt said, I'm going to be going out to San Francisco for those games. So no pod after the Wemby game on Friday, but Chris and I will be back together on Monday morning in San Francisco after the first Wolves Warriors game. So until then, he's Britt. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.